Imagine a poor boy in a devastated Germany, penniless, without connections, but with one obsession: to reinvent the way the world moves. This boy, ignored by many, would be responsible for creating one of the most valuable brands in history, the legendary Mercedes-Benz. But the real story behind it, you've never heard. Today, you'll discover how a young visionary faced poverty, war, and the impossible to transform an idea into a billion-dollar empire. If you love true stories of overcoming adversity, business, and minds that change the world, subscribe to the channel now, turn on notifications, and leave a like, because this video will inspire and surprise you from beginning to end. Now, let's go back in time to where it all began. Karl Benz was born on November 25, 1844, in the small town of Mühlberg, now part of Karlsruhe, Germany. His arrival into the world occurred at a time when the country was still a cluster of small Germanic states, economically fragile and socially divided. His father, Johann Georg Benz, was a railway engineer, a relatively new profession, linked to the beginning of the Industrial Revolution that was slowly spreading across Europe. His mother, Josephine, was a housewife who struggled to keep the family together in the face of hardship. Karl's childhood was marked by tragedy and scarcity. When he was only 2 years old, his father died of pneumonia, leaving the family without their main source of income. Despite the precarious situation, his mother made a bold decision for the time: to invest in her son's education. She believed that, even with limited resources, knowledge could change Karl's destiny. And she was right. From a young age, Karl Benz demonstrated an unusual curiosity for machines, gears, and everything involving movement. He was fascinated by trains and the new technologies that were beginning to emerge. Encouraged by his mother, he studied with extreme dedication. By the age of 9, he was already speaking about physics and mechanics with ease. At 15, he entered the Karlsruhe Polytechnic Institute, an extraordinary achievement for someone of his age and social standing. While other young people considered traditional careers, Karl dreamed of something different. He wanted to create. He wanted to build something that had never existed before. And even with all the limitations, lack of money, prejudice due to his humble origins, and a rigid society that did not encourage innovation, he persevered. Having graduated as a mechanical engineer at 19, Benz began his career working for various engineering companies. But he soon realized that ordinary jobs did not satisfy his restless mind. He wanted the freedom to experiment, to make mistakes, to innovate. And above all, he wanted to fulfill a dream that seemed like madness: to create a vehicle that could move without horses. At the time, the idea of a car was considered absurd. The streets were made for carriages, and horses dominated urban transport. To speak of a vehicle that could drive itself was almost like talking about witchcraft. But for Karl Benz, it was merely a matter of time, effort, and engineering. During his early working years, he began saving money, little by little, with the goal of opening his own business. He believed that he would only have true freedom if he could control his work environment. And so, in 1871, together with a partner, he founded his first workshop, Benz & C. Initially focused on the manufacture of stationary gas engines. Despite financial difficulties, lack of support, and general skepticism, Karl continued to believe. In the solitude of the workshop, during long shifts of manual labor, he gave shape to an idea that the world was not yet ready to accept. It was the beginning of a journey that would change the course of human history. A journey born from poverty, persistence, and an unwavering dream. Now he had the tools, the workshop, and the knowledge. The next step would be to put into practice the invention that had been in his mind since his youth: the first automobile in history. After graduating as a mechanical engineer from the Karlsruhe Polytechnic Institute at the age of 19, Karl Benz immersed himself in the world of industrial engineering, a field still under construction in 19th century Germany. His first job was at the Maschinenbaugesellschaft Karlsruhe Company, where he worked with steam locomotives. Although this work was directly linked to the most modern sector of the time, the railway, Benz soon realized that he didn't just want to keep machines running. He wanted to create something that didn't yet exist. It was during this period that his obsession began to solidify: to develop a machine that could transport people independently, without depending on rails or horses. It was a daring idea for any engineer of the time, but especially for a young man from a humble background, without political or industrial connections. After working for other companies, Benz accumulated experience in gas engines, transmission systems, and the construction of mechanical parts. Each role served as a piece of a larger puzzle. He was learning, testing, and absorbing everything that could be useful for his final project, even if, until then, that project still only existed in his mind. In 1871, alongside an investor partner, Carl Benz founded the company, Benz & C. Rhenish Gas Engine Factory, a company specializing in gas engines for industrial uses. The company was promising, but Benz's focus went beyond stationary engines. While his colleagues saw engines as an end in themselves, he saw them as a means, engines capable of powering something greater, a fully autonomous vehicle independent of animal traction. Benz began dedicating secret hours, inside and outside the workshop, to building what would become the first car powered by internal combustion. In the silence of the laboratory, he sketched designs, conducted tests, adjusted parts, assembled and disassembled engine parts and metal structures. The challenge was enormous. The engines of the time were too large, inefficient, and unstable. Roads as we know them today did not exist. The concept of driving itself had not yet been invented. But Benz believed it was possible, and, more than that, necessary. He understood that the world was changing. Cities were growing, transportation was becoming an increasingly bigger problem, and the Industrial Revolution demanded faster and more efficient solutions for getting around. The idea of an individual vehicle that didn't depend on rails or animals was visionary, but it was also functional. He knew he was about to change the world. He just needed time and courage. During this prototyping phase, Benz faced numerous difficulties. His partners wanted to maintain their focus on industrial engines, as that was what generated immediate profit. He, on the other hand, used some of the company's resources to pursue his secret project. This led to friction, disagreements, and threats of a breakup. But none of this stopped him. He moved forward, testing new metal alloys, studying fuels, and searching for a reliable ignition system. It was during this phase that he began to assemble the framework of what would become the motor car, the first car in history. The model was lightweight, had 3 wheels, and a single-cylinder gasoline engine with less than 1 horsepower. Benz knew he was facing something revolutionary, even if, until then, no one else believed it. He had overcome poverty, prejudice, and a lack of technical and financial support. Now, he had fully embraced engineering, not just as a science, but as a tool to transform an insane idea into reality. This was the moment when Carl Benz ceased to be just an engineer. He became an inventor, a pioneer, and he was about to present the world with a concept that would forever change the way humanity moves. After years of study, testing, and sleepless nights in his workshop, Carl Benz finally achieved what many considered impossible: building the first functional automobile in history. In 1885, he presented the world with a Benz patent motor car, a 3-wheeled vehicle, powered by a 0.75 horsepower single-cylinder gasoline engine, capable of reaching approximately 16 kilometers per hour. But contrary to what one might imagine, the initial reception was anything but enthusiastic. The society of the time simply wasn't ready to accept that invention. The prototype was rudimentary. The structure was made of steel tubes and wooden wheels with iron rims. The engine was exposed, and the entire operation of the vehicle seemed like something out of a laboratory experiment, which, in part, was true. There were no upholstered seats, conventional steering wheel, or any comfort system. The steering system itself was precarious, and the roads of the time didn't help. After all, the world was still made for horses and carriages. When Benz gave his first public demonstrations, the reaction was one of astonishment and mockery. People saw that noisy machine as a threat, an aberration, or worse, a useless thing. There were even cases of panic. In one of the first demonstrations, local residents even called the police, believing that this monster was dangerous. Others simply laughed, saying it was an adult toy that would never replace the horse. Besides public rejection, Carl faced a huge technical hurdle. The engine, although functional, had flaws. The ignition system was unstable, the cooling was inefficient, and the brakes barely worked. With each test, new problems arose, and with them, new adjustments. Progress was slow, and each improvement required time, money, and nerves of steel. But perhaps the greatest challenge was to convince people that this was the future. Benz's car didn't just introduce a new machine. It demanded the creation of a new human behavior: driving, controlling an engine, using flammable fuel, abandoning the horse, a symbol of status and confidence for centuries, to rely on gears, valves, and controlled explosions. For many, it was heresy. Benz's own partners were alarmed by the tests. Many pressured him to abandon the project and refocus on stationary engines, which were still generating some return. Criticism mounted. The lack of customers was evident. And yet, Benz refused to give up. There was a glint in his eyes, the kind of conviction that can't be bought or borrowed. He knew he was a few steps ahead of the world, and he was willing to pay the price for it. On January 29, 1886, he officially registered his invention with the Imperial Patent Office of Germany. It was the DRP license number 37435, and it contained the description of the vehicle with a gas engine. From that moment on, even without public or commercial support, Carl Benz had entered history as the creator of the automobile. But the struggle was far from over. The invention existed. The registration was official. But the world remained blind. Without validation, without acceptance, and without a market, Benz's dream still risked dying, like so many other revolutionary ideas forgotten by time. It was at this critical moment that a woman entered the scene, and would forever change the fate of Carl Benz's invention. In 1888, 3 years after Carl Benz created his first automobile, the project still faced resistance, disinterest, and disdain. Despite all the technical effort, constant improvements, and registered patent, the invention seemed doomed to failure. Society didn't understand, investors doubted, and not even the company's employees fully trusted the potential of that horseless car. It was in this bleak scenario that a key figure emerged as the decisive force behind Mercedes-Benz success: Bertha Benz, Carl's wife. Bertha was not just a life partner. She was a visionary in her own right. Coming from a wealthy family, she was the main initial investor in Carl's business when Benz & C. was founded in 1871. At that time, women didn't even have the legal right to make investments without their husband's approval. But Bertha ignored social norms and put part of her inheritance into Carl's project, fully trusting in the mind and potential of the man she had chosen to build a life with. She closely followed the tests, the failures, the adjustments, and the growing discouragement in the surrounding environment. She knew that if something wasn't done toto proved to the world, if the car didn't work, all that work would be in vain. So, without asking permission and without telling her husband, Bertha made one of the boldest decisions in the history of engineering and the automotive industry. One morning in August 1888, Bertha woke up early, called her 2 sons, Eugen and Richard, and without telling anyone, took the patent motor car. He left the garage and set off on a historic journey. His destination was the city of Pforzheim, where his mother lived, about 106 kilometers away from Mannheim. It was at first long-distance trip in history made by car, driven by a woman, without maps, without enough gasoline, without workshops, without mechanics. Just courage, intelligence, and determination. During the journey, Bertha faced a series of difficulties that today seem trivial, but which, at that time, represented real obstacles. Uneven dirt roads, lack of fuel. She had to stop at a pharmacy and buy some. Ligroin, a solvent used as fuel, carburetor blockages, brake failure, and even ignition problems. At one point, the brake started to fail, and she herself used a local shoemaker to reinforce the system with leather, unknowingly creating the first-line brake system in automotive history. Bertha also had to clean the valves manually and unclog the fuel using a hat pin. And all this while dealing with the astonishment of people along the way, who saw that noisy monster passing by on the roads as if it were a supernatural entity. Upon arriving in Pforzheim, Bertha sent a telegram to Carl informing him of the successful trip. The following day, she made the return journey, equally challenging, confirming, once and for all, that the automobile was reliable, functional, and capable of traveling long distances. This achievement, although ignored by much of the press at the time, it marked a turning point for the history of the automobile. Bertha's journey not only showed that the car was viable, but also revealed to Carl himself technical points that needed improvement, such as the braking system, the fuel supply, and the suspension design. More than that, Bertha Benz proved that Carl's vision was not madness. It was not just a vision, but a glimpse into the future. His courageous act sparked public interest and attracted the attention of potential investors. Sales, previously non-existent, began to materialize. Confidence in the project grew. And finally, the Benz name began to gain respect. Today, more than a century later, the route taken by Bertha is officially recognized as the Route Bertha Benz. and it can be driven by modern motorists as a tribute to the woman who not only believed in the impossible, but drove the impossible until it became reality. With the success of Bertha Benz's historic journey, Carl's invention finally began to attract the attention it deserved. The world had witnessed, for the first time, the real possibility of individual locomotion without horses, a concept previously unthinkable. Even so, transforming a prototype into a successful commercial product required more than engineering. It demanded business acumen, strategic adaptation, and, above all, scale. In the following years, Carl Benz made constant improvements to his automobile, refining the ignition system, the vehicle structure, and the engine's reliability. Subsequent versions of the motor wagon had 4 wheels, more comfortable seats, and more precise controls. Even so, Benz and C faced increasing challenges. While Carl was an engineering genius, his company still struggled to compete in a market that was beginning to heat up. This was because another powerful name was emerging in parallel. Gottlieb Daimler, another equally brilliant German engineer, who had also created his own motorized vehicle, almost at the same time as Carl, and without either knowing of the other. Daimler developed high-speed engines and was responsible for founding the company, the Daimler Motoring Gesellschaft, DMG. Daimler, unlike Benz, had a more aggressive commercial approach. Its vehicles quickly gained ground in the transportation sector and even in racing competitions, where powerful and reliable engines made all the difference. DMG also relied on the talent of Wilhelm Maybach, one of the most innovative engineers of the time, responsible for significant improvements to Daimler engines. During the 1890s and early 1900s, Benz and C and DMG waged a silent market war. Both grew, but also faced the harsh realities of the new automotive industry. High production costs, economies of scale, economic crises, and a public still adapting. The decisive turning point came in 1900, when DMG launched a new car model called Mercedes, name inspired by Mercedes Jelinek, daughter of Emil Jelinek, a prominent businessman and car distributor of the time. Jelinek was a marketing visionary and knew that giving the car a softer, more elegant name would make it more appealing to the European elite. He not only helped finance the project but also imposed technical and performance requirements. The result was a vehicle that was far more modern, stable, and reliable than previous models. The success of the Mercedes car was overwhelming. The name quickly became a symbol of sophistication, innovation, and luxury. It was, literally, the car that every European aristocrat wanted to own. DMG prospered from this. And Benz, although still respected, began to lose ground. World War I, which broke out in 1914, worsened the situation for both companies. Civilian production was drastically reduced, factories were converted for military purposes, and the supply of parts and materials was severely affected. Furthermore, the post-war economic climate plunged Germany into hyperinflation, instability, and industrial collapse. It was in this chaotic context that the idea of the Union emerged. In 1924, the two German giants, Benz and C and Daimler Motoring Gesellschaft, they signed a cooperation agreement. The objective was clear: to survive the crisis, combine technological forces, and reduce costs. 2 years later, on June 28, 1926, this alliance became official with a complete merger of the companies, giving rise to the iconic brand Mercedes-Benz. The new logo combined elements from both companies. The three-pointed star of DMG, representing the dominance of Daimler engines on land, water, and air, and the traditional laurel wreath of Benz, a symbol of victory and tradition. Thus was born one of the most powerful, prestigious, and recognizable brands on the planet. With the merger, Carl Benz's legacy gained even more strength. His pioneering contribution was finally recognized on a global scale, and his invention began to be produced, improved, and sold in various countries. Although he was already retired from his executive duties at the company, he lived to see his invention reach the entire world. The emergence of Mercedes-Benz was not merely the union of two competing companies. It was the consolidation of a vision, the fusion of brilliant engineering and business strategy, the consecration of two dreams that, even though born separately, shared the same destiny: to forever transform the history of human mobility. The history of Mercedes-Benz is marked by innovation and success, but also by extremely dark and challenging moments. No company that survived the 20th century emerged unscathed, and Mercedes was no different. Throughout its history, the brand has faced some of the greatest crises in modern history, including 2 world wars, economic collapses, and drastic restructurings.